Hello, my name is Ragon Francy, and today I'm here to tell you all a story. The story of the 6,500 foster care children in Oklahoma today. The story of the 27,000 children who live with incarcerated parents. Today, I'm here to tell you the story of the 45% of foster care children who struggle with drug abuse. I'm here to tell the story of the 390,000 children in America who are in the foster care system today. Now, you all are probably on hour number 2 of watching a TED Talk you're not particularly interested about from someone you only ever see in passing period. But I promise, if you stick with me for the next 10 or so minutes, I'll say something entertaining and hopefully something you'll remember within the next hour or so. George Orwell once said, "Perhaps one did not want to be loved so much as to be understood." And every time I hear this, I think of my foster brother, Key Dawkins. Key was just like us. He went to Jenks and he graduated despite all odds. Despite going from house to house, living on his friends' couches, he persisted. And not just because the college and career office was constantly on his ass about his naviance assignments, but because it's who he was. Key was kind, he was funny, he lit up a room everywhere he went. 2 years ago when he graduated, ORU had a massive storm, and it caused the building to lose power. Now, so despite this, Key walked 2 miles in the pouring rain just to graduate. And graduate he did. After he graduated, my family took on a more familiar role in his life. We got him enrolled and moved into college. And after this, he succeeded in being the very first person in his family to ever go to college. Key was like a brother to me. 2 years ago, Key passed away from the same drug abuse that he experienced while in foster care. I was really angry at myself. I thought, should I have noticed something? Was there something I missed? He lived with me. Why didn't I notice that my own foster brother was struggling? Could I have been a better sister? But once my grief began to subside, I came up with the research question. How does foster care affect adults' mental health, their substance abuse, and incarceration rates? For AP research, I came up with a hypothesis that tested what foster care would increase the likelihood of drug abuse and incarceration rates, as well as instill poor mental health in young adults. The sample that I used was a mixed method approach, in which I surveyed people who had aged out of foster care to see if they ever experienced drug abuse, if they ever lived with a parent who was incarcerated, and what their mental health was like. I had around 25 individuals answer, 21 were female, 4 were male, ages 18 to 28 of varying ethnicities, and the things that I found were shocking. The very first thing I found was that 56% of foster children had lived with a family member previously that had been imprisoned, and 28% of those who responded to my survey reported that they had been arrested themselves. Now, the shocking thing about this is every single individual who reported that they had also been arrested had lived with a family member who had also been imprisoned. According to the Journal of Research of Crime and Delinquency, 13% of their sample experienced imprisonment as well. Now, this doesn't seem substantial until you realize that 1.58 to 1.96. Now, what does that mean? That means that foster care children are around 2 times as likely as their peers to be imprisoned in later adulthood. Now, continuing this, I established a correlation between foster care and the socioeconomic state of the child. According to mental health interventions of children in foster care, mental health outcomes worsened tremendously from economically secure to economically insecure households. I found that 52% of those who answered my survey came from families who made $50,000 or less, which is what we might consider the poverty line, and that 72% of that 52 was diagnosed with a mental health disorder. I also found, according to mental health problems of children in foster care, that 80% have serious behavioral or mental problems. That could be ODD, that could be OCD, ADHD, a wide variety of different issues that are substantial among this group. I found that 72% of my sample were all diagnosed with a mental health disorder, and that 88% of those lived with a biological family member who was also in foster care, or not also in foster care, but also had a mental health disorder. Now, if statistics show that there are 390,000 children in foster care in America, and around 80% having a mental health disorder, that means that around 312,000 children have a mental health disorder or a behavioral disorder. This is thousands, and this is currently. This doesn't even account for individuals who have aged out of foster care, who are in young adulthood, later adulthood, or even elderly. We're talking millions of people that struggle from the negativity that foster care brings them. According to Revealing the Hidden Side of Foster Care, 4 in 10 foster children have persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness. Around 20% seriously consider attempting suicide, and about 10% end up attempting suicide. Now, this data is slightly skewed for our LGBTQIA+ community, in which this data doubles, with around 20% committing suicide and around 40% having seriously considered attempting suicide. I found that 40% answered that they had experienced drug abuse while in foster care, and 60% of the users were also diagnosed with a mental health disorder. But what's this correlation? Well, when people feel helpless, they feel like they have depression, they're struggling with other issues, they self-medicate, which is what we might consider drug abuse. Now, I found that around 40% were exposed to drugs while in foster care, 40% aged out of foster care, meaning they hit 18 years or older and were essentially kicked out of a foster care home. They were left with no resources and no family. I found that 72% are diagnosed with a mental health disorder, 52% experienced homelessness, 88% have biological family that struggle with mental health, and 56% lived with someone who was sent to prison. Now, this is a lot of words, and it can be very difficult to understand. But I came to the conclusion that foster care children who were moved 2 or more times, aged out of foster care, grew up in an economically disadvantaged home, and also had biological family who had been incarcerated, were 2 times as likely to struggle from poor mental health, drug abuse, and were over 2 times as likely to be incarcerated in later adulthood. Now, you're probably wondering, what does this have to do with you? You're sitting here today, and you probably don't know anybody who's been through foster care. You probably don't even know that there's an underlying issue with foster care to begin with. But that's a different TED Talk for another really long day. Look around you. There are people in this audience that have struggled due to the same statistics that I have found. And it's shocking. It was shocking to me. Or as of right now, I have 4 adopted cousins. I had a foster brother. And all of this made me feel helpless. So I decided to do something. I created a nonprofit organization called Key's Closet that focuses on collecting and distributing high-quality clothing for teenagers in foster care. Key was rambunctious, he was hilarious, he was kind, and he sought to distinguish himself from the same system that sought to define him. Whether it be through a new belt or some new shoes he saw on Facebook Marketplace, he was incredibly interested in fashion, and he sought to distinguish himself through that. So I founded something that would help him. If anybody is interested in helping with Key's Closet, since I am graduating, please meet with me after this TED Talk or email me at ragonfrancy@gmail.com. Key's story, unfortunately, isn't unique. There are millions of people just like Key. There are millions who are unseen, they are unheard, and they are swept under the rug because their issues aren't substantial enough for people to talk about. Mental health goes worldwide, but people don't realize that foster care significantly increases negative outcomes in later adulthood. There are people here that have struggled, and there's things you can do. If you don't want to help out in a nonprofit, talk to people. Spread awareness of foster care, and above all, go into the world having a new understanding that there are people around you that are struggling from things that you don't see. Thank you.